Hello and welcome to the Two-Man Power Trip of Wrestling. Your host, JP John Poz. With me today, very special guest. We know him as the last real professional wrestler. He is the veteran himself, former OVW Heavyweight Champion, Mr. Jack Vaughn. Jack, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you today?
Doing very good. What's going on in your world? What are you up to?
Right now, I'm kind of just relaxing at home. I got a couple shows this weekend, so I'm just kind of taking it easy until I gotta hit the ring tomorrow.
Nice. Any videos you've been up to lately? Any of those awesome funny videos?
Yeah. So funny enough, I filmed one yesterday that I'm really excited. I plan on posting it tomorrow. I don't know exactly when this will get posted, but it's I'm actually really excited for it. It's one of the ones where I kind of got really goofy with it, which I do that sometimes. And whenever I think of something really silly, I like to I get really excited for it. So.
Nice. And any teases out there? Anything you can tease?
Oh, yes. It's basically like what would happen if Jack Vaughn sold out.
Oh, okay. I like that. Nice, nice. Where's like the inspiration behind those? Because they're so funny, but a lot of them are, pretty accurate. You know what I mean? A lot of them are definitely true to life.
I mean, it's a lot of it's just based on stuff that I've experienced throughout my career and stories that I've been told from other guys that have been around as long as me. It's there's a lot of things that you see. There's things that you see pretty often. Like it's almost like a universal locker room in a way where it's like no matter what locker room you're in, you see a lot of the same stuff. So and a lot of it's just just poking fun at a business that I love, and I feel like if anyone should be allowed to poke fun at the wrestling business, it should be us.
Yeah, the wrestlers themselves. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially a veteran of the ring, such as yourself. So when you're doing those video stuff, do you ever get anything like not slack, but do you ever get people being like, "Hey, was that making fun of me?" Or "Hey, what was that about?" Do you ever get like a reaction from the boys about it?
I well, I mean, I know that there are some wrestlers that don't like the stuff that I do. And then, but like, as far as like specific comments towards wrestlers, no, it's mostly like guys will be joking around and they'll comment like, "Oh, I feel attacked" and stuff like that. But it's all in lighthearted fun.
You mostly get positive comments, I would guess, or probably mostly positive, right?
Mostly positive. Twitter is a different story. There's a lot of negativity on Twitter.
Oof.
But yeah, I mean, I got a lot more slack from people when I first started because I don't know how much we want to go into like my past, but like I kind of came out of nowhere as a guy claiming to have been around a long time who hadn't really accomplished much. And it was one of those like, well, who is this guy? I've never even heard of him. Like, who's he ever beat, kind of thing. And I think people will slowly begin to realize, oh, okay, it's part of like his whole shtick. It's not just him being a jerk. So I definitely got some more heat back then than I do now. I think now, for the most part, everyone's kind of caught on to what I'm doing.
So funny, like thigh slaps. I know that's probably maybe the biggest or maybe the most famous one that you've done, right? Probably.
That is the so I put that in one of my first videos, and people seemed to think it was funny, so I just kind of kept doing it. And
Yeah.
then now it's to the point to where if I don't do a thigh slap in a video, it's like the first thing I hear in all the comments.
Hey,
It,
what's
it,
going on here? Why?
yeah, like it's basically become part of the gimmick. Ironically, like it's something that I did to kind of something that I was poking fun at, and then now it's the thing that I'm known for.
What do you think about thigh slaps, though? Really, though, when you think about it, what do you think of it? Because I feel like it might be getting a little out of control.
I think it's getting out of control. I think if anything that is done to that degree, like it's oversaturation, and then it kind of becomes pointless in a way. I remember, you know, I mean, I know that like people did the super kick before Shawn Michaels. I know that, but like, that was the first time that I remember like hearing that contact and not realizing that he was actually slapping his leg when he did it, and it actually sounded more impactful. But now it's like guys don't even try to hide it anymore.
Hmm.
So yeah, at that point, it's just like, well, now it's obvious that you're just trying to make it sound bigger, which it does, but at the same time, I feel like it takes away from what we do in terms of like making it look like a fight.
For me, Michaels, even when you go back and watch his matches, which I've seen, pretty much all of them, you don't really notice that he's doing it. Like, he's so smooth and so good at it. And I know people are saying, "Oh, but he's slapping," but you don't even notice it. He's so good at it.
Yeah, and that's he was. I don't know if maybe he just had a different way of doing it, or maybe we just didn't catch on because nobody else was really doing it. I think it's probably more that, because now it's like, I mean, guys will literally slap their thighs when they chop somebody, and it's like you're already doing something that's going to make a good sound. Why are you taking the extra step? But yeah, I think it might have just been something where, because we didn't see it all the time, it wasn't as noticeable.
One thing I noticed too, a guy did it. I don't know if it was recent or not, but I saw the video recently. He did it before he hit his finisher, so it sounded like he didn't really hit him, and then all of a sudden he hit his finish. So I was like, wow, like he was more obsessed with slapping the leg than actually hitting the move. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Never really seen that before. Weird.
Yeah, and you see a lot of guys do it on moves that wouldn't make a slapping sound. I see guys slapping their legs when they headbutt a guy, and I'm like, that's not the sound that a head makes when it hits a human body.
Yes. Kind of funny though, sometimes, but
it is. It is amusing. I will say that.
I know the Young Bucks, obviously, they do it now. Now it's just like on purpose, really, almost like trolling when they do it. I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like it's just part of their shtick now. I mean, they've built a successful career doing it, so you can't fault them.
Yeah, but I feel like there's so many guys that just try to, I don't know, copy it, or maybe they're trying to get that cheat pop. I kind of don't even know the thought process behind it. I guess they think if they make that sound, the crowd is gonna pop for it, I guess.
I think just in not even so much just those moves, but I think a lot of people today they're just trying to get that from the crowd on every move, and that's why we're in a state of wrestling where a lot of guys it's all about spots rather than storytelling.
What do you think about that? Because I feel like the art of storytelling is what makes it so compelling, which makes you want to watch it each week, makes you want to watch the finish of the match rather than move, spot, move.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I got into wrestling at a very young age, grew up watching it with my dad, my brother. And back then, like, I didn't care what happened in the match. All I cared about was who won and who I was watching. I mean, I'm 30. I just turned 39, so I was born in '85. I grew up watching Hogan and Warrior and Savage, and those were my guys. And I was more interested in like the characters of guys like the Undertaker and the Ultimate Warrior. I didn't care, if they were doing a bunch of spots. I cared about what the outcome of the match was, and sort of like the story that they were telling around the match. And I do think, I mean, there's a spot in wrestling for everything, but I do think that the guys that are focusing more on telling a story are going to have a longer and more successful career. Because I think my biggest fear with the whole spot heavy work rate kind of wrestling is that a lot of these guys are doing a lot of unnecessary bumping and a lot of moves that are a little bit more dangerous than they maybe need to be. And that in turn is going to lead to guys having to retire early simply out of injuries.
Yeah, for sure, which is kind of a scary thing when you look at it. I know injuries happen, but it's almost like you're throwing the injury bug out there even before, like you're killing your bump card, just taking all these nutty bumps and dangerous spots.
Yeah. And, I mean, obviously I love the old school wrestling, and I know we like to, people love to say that wrestling has evolved, and I agree with that. And I'm glad that it did, because, I do appreciate the creativity that you see in wrestling today, but I think that there's a certain point where the creativity is kind of overtaking the storytelling. And when it's moves just for the sake of moves and spots just for the sake of spots, that's where it kind of loses me. And plus, a lot, like you said, you mentioned like the bump card. Sorry about my cameras being a little weird there. The bump card, it's just kind of like, man, you think about guys like Kenny Omega, who I think is right around my same age.
Yeah.
And he's already talking about retiring. And now, granted, he's done a lot more wrestling in his career than I have, especially, doing all the stuff in New Japan. He's been, he's one of the top guys in the business, but he does have that style. And I hate to see a guy, because physically I still feel fantastic. Again, he's wrestled a lot more than me, but he's also got that style that's a lot more bump heavy. And, it's a shame to think that he might be coming towards the end of his career because of injuries and how many bumps he's taken.
Yeah, so true. And like one of the most talented guys, but Man, he's
Absolutely.
taken an absolute beating, especially
Mhm.
AEW New Japan. Those matches, like he's just been absolutely just kind of killing his body.
And those matches especially, I mean, like it's one thing to take that many bumps in a match, but he's taken like those matches are even more physical than what a normal match would be. So
Yep. Yep. And when you go back, like you said, you're a lifelong fan and you're watching it. Yes, it's awesome. Like the guys that can actually wrestle and the work rate guys are awesome. But like you become attached to the Hogans of the world, the Macho Mans. It's the character plus the story. Like you become forever attached to those guys because of their storytelling.
yeah, I mean, my favorite wrestler of all time is The Undertaker, and it's I obviously he's a testament to how long of a career you can have with a good character, and how if you're able to evolve it and that sort of thing. And I think going back and watching early matches of The Undertaker, a lot of them are kind of hard to watch because they're kind of slow and plotting, and not to say that there's not a place for that, because I think that I work a fairly slow style compared to some guys today, but obviously as his career went on, he changed with the times, even with his in-ring style. And I mean, you find someone that tells me that him versus Michaels was boring, and I'll show you someone who's full of it.
Right.
But yeah, like it was the character that kept me going.
When you look at Undertaker too, that's funny. Like the no selling obviously was a part of it, and he's wrestling a lot of big guys. So the matches are obviously more story driven, but they were not masterpieces for sure. They were very slow.
Yeah, and I think he'll even admit to that. Like you watch some of those early WrestleMania matches, they were not 5 stars.
Yeah, definitely not. So what made you want to get in the business? Is it because you're a lifelong fan? And because like guys like the Undertaker, or why did you make the leap and decide, hey, I'm a huge fan, I want to get into this business? Obviously, we're talking about 20 plus years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I was just a fan. I think I was like 3 or 4 when I really first started watching, and then I just never. It's funny because like I have an older brother, and I would watch it with him, and like he kind of got out of it when the Attitude Era was kind of coming to a close, and then I just kind of never got out of it. I just stuck with it, and then I had a group of friends of mine in high school that were all big wrestling fans, and when we were coming close to graduating high school, we had a backyard wrestling league like a lot of people my age did.
Yep.
And there was a few of us that were just like, hey, let's actually give this a shot and see what we can do.
Love that. Old school backyard wrestling. Those were the days. That was the
Yeah.
best. When you're about to step into business, how do you make the leap and get in? Like, do you find somebody to be your trainer, or is it somebody local? Like, how did you like make the leap and get into the business?
So I used to, the gym that I used to go to, there was a guy that was there that knew that I loved wrestling and knew that I wanted to get into it. And he had seen an ad in the paper for a wrestling school being run by Shark Boy. So I'm from the Cincinnati area. More actually, I kind of grew up more towards Dayton, and that's where the area where Shark Boy's from. And his school was more designed to be like a camp rather than a school. It was specifically designed to be a 15-week course to kind of teach you the basics and the fundamentals, and then from there you kind of decide where you want to go afterward. But yeah, it was just we were kind of looking for a school. A couple of my buddies had gone to a place up in Dayton, and I was just kind of late to the game. And when I heard about that ad, I went to the website and I like immediately signed up for it.
That's pretty cool. Shark Boy, obviously, very well known in TNA, and I don't know, just one of those guys where great character, good time to be in TNA too. I mean, obviously, he got pretty famous from TNA. What did you think about him and his schooling and his teaching?
It's funny because at that point, the only thing I really knew about like wrestling training was what I had seen from like Tough Enough or reading books like Mick Foley's book, stuff like that. And they kind of had like horror stories about that kind of stuff. I think Mick Foley's book even talks about like seeing a guy like pry out a guy's eyeball and smash it, like some like crazy stuff.
Yep.
And Sharp Boys was not anything like that. It was a lot more chill. It was, we still took it very seriously. It's not like we were goofing off, but it was also it was limited to 10 guys. So we were all able to get plenty of ring time and to really nail home the fundamentals that we were being taught. So it was very relaxed, but at the same time, the guys that were taking it seriously were not, we wanted to try to pursue this, so we were obviously taking it very seriously.
When you are going through the business, do they do that old school training anymore at that point, or no? That was like past, like where like it's a lot of cardio, like the power plant. I mean, we've seen those videos where they kind of want to blow you up. Is it different than that when you were training, or was it one of the things where they actually want you to learn the business? Because it almost seems like at that point, the power plant and even Tough Enough to Extent and even the old school guys almost like want to see if you can like survive.
When I started, I mean, at least with Shark Boy, it was not about blowing us up. I mean, obviously we started each training session off by warming up with drills and stuff, but it wasn't this like I'm going to drill you until you throw up kind of thing. It was more about telling us how to properly execute the moves, how to make things make sense in the context of a match. I do know that there was also the HWA, which was around me at that time. And I had friends that had trained there, and I think theirs was a little bit more cardio intensive, but not anything too crazy. I had attended a couple of training sessions, and there was a lot more like push-ups, squats, that sort of thing. But it wasn't like, yeah, we're not here to torture you. We still want you to learn how to wrestle.
I always feel like the old school guys is almost more like let's see if they'll survive, and then I'll give them a heads up and train them, and you know what I mean. And then maybe if they survive, I'll give them like the keys to the castle and actually train them the business. Right back then, crazy.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I've heard stories about Vern Gagne's camps where it was like in the middle of winter and they're running 5 miles before they even begin to do like their stretches. You know what I mean? Like and then I think he even like basically cardioed them to the point to where trying to get them to quit before they ever step foot in a ring. So it's funny because I think about that kind of stuff, and I had a friend that went and lived in Japan for about 6 months. And he told me like every day at the dojo, it was this. And I wish that we had training like that over here, just because it is one of those things where I kind of wish that we could weed out some of the people that don't want it as much as others. I don't think I could do that training now just because I'm a little bit older. But, when I was in my 20s and in the best shape that I could be, I think I probably could have handled it. But I think I think training today is more focused on, hey, let's teach you how to do moves rather than making sure that you have a heart for the business.
Yeah, that's definitely true. You'll see who wants it, who really wants it, and who doesn't want it. Yeah, it's almost maybe you think there might be letting too many guys in the business nowadays? Like almost anybody can get in?
At least in the United States, I think so. I think it's one of those things where as long as you pay your money, and especially in like our world has gotten a lot more progressive. People don't like to say negative things towards people. You're not allowed. And it's not even really discrimination, but it's like a case where like if someone can't cut it, you're not allowed to tell them that you can't be a wrestler, because then it goes on social media and you're the trainer that wouldn't let them train and that sort of thing. And but yeah, I think today it's anyone who wants to be a wrestler, as long as they have the money and can show up to training a couple days a week, they can be a wrestler.
But they don't really know the basics and the fundamentals, and they might not have the heart for the business. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there is something to be said. Like I know there's guys that are totally content with just being wrestlers on a local show, and there's nothing wrong with that. If they know that that's their limit, then that's fine. But I do think that that's also part of what's hurting wrestling, is that there's so many guys that think that they have what it takes to get to the top levels when they're never going to get anything past the local levels. And then also just trainers. I think a lot of trainers are just, and rightfully so, that they're just too afraid to tell guys no these days, because if they do, they might wind up losing a bunch of trainees.
Yeah, and lose some money. Yeah, you might not be getting that check or whatever from the guys.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. At the end of the day, they're running a business, so they definitely got to have that money coming in.
So when did you get your first break, and kind of where did you get your first break?
Man, it's funny. Like I don't really feel like I really caught on until I was like 17 years in.
Wow,
Like
really?
the first 10 years of my career, I kind of just stayed around Cincinnati. I was wrestling for a company called the NWF here in like Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky,
Is that
and they
Roger
ran,
Ruffin?
yeah,
Yeah.
and they ran shows every week, sometimes Friday and Saturday. So I didn't really have to look for bookings because I always had one. And I will say, like, I wish that I would have really understood or maybe had someone that would tell me the truth, because at the time I felt like, hey, like Abyss came from here, Carl Anderson came from here, so if I'm good enough, I'll just get noticed. And I don't hold anything against Roger or anybody, but it's more like I wish I had someone tell me like, hey man, like if you really want to succeed, you got to get on the road, you got to like travel and network and all that stuff. And I quit wrestling in 2013, and then I spent 3 or 4 years where I really didn't do anything, and then I kind of came back and did some shows here and there, and then really it was, I think, between October 2013, which is when I retired, and then July of 2020, after the COVID stuff lifted, I probably only had about 20 matches in that span of time, and that was when I first started wrestling as the veteran, and then slowly but surely kind of built up my credibility. And I guess really my first break would have been when I first kind of debuted with OVW, and within a couple of weeks I had won the heavyweight championship.
So what is that like when you do that? Because obviously OVW, we all know, very, very famous. We know from Netflix. We know from being a WWE developmental territory. What is that like? Because, like you said, you create the veteran, you go to OVW, but almost immediately or very, very quickly, you got put into a huge spot there.
Yeah. So it was kind of strange, because what happened was I had reached out to them, and they had me do some dark matches, and I basically did dark matches for like 2 months. I hadn't even gotten on TV, and then I finally got on TV, and I basically got squashed, and then I was gone for 6 months. They never called me. They never, like, I was in contact with them, but they never needed me. And then one day I was just sitting around, and I got a text from one of the agents, and was like, hey, can you be here on Thursday? And I was like, sure, yeah. I went, and they kind of explained to me what the deal was, and they just immediately put me into the top angle. And a couple of weeks later, I wound up in a heavyweight championship match that I wound up winning. So I kind of went from, kind of bummed out that they weren't using me to being basically the top guy in the company overnight. And that was not what I expected to happen, but obviously that was sort of my strap the rocket to my back kind of thing, and I've been around ever since.
Yeah, that's like a pretty big honor if you think about it. It's like, man, I'm not around. Are they going to use me? Going to use me? Yep, they're going to use me, and I'm going to be the top guy. I mean, that's a little bit of pressure, I guess you could say.
Yeah, but I also think it's good for wrestlers to hear that story, because don't get frustrated if a company, it could just be a case where a company just doesn't have a spot for you right then. And I think that's really what it was. It's like there just wasn't really anywhere for me to fit in. And then there was like, well, we got this spot that needs filled, and we know this guy. We know he's solid. We know he's got a good character, and we know he can get over as a heel. So let's put him in there and see what he can do.
When they do that, what's the explanation to you? It's like they like, how could, hey, we didn't really use you, but they don't really mention like, hey, we plan on bringing you back, and we're going to give you a huge push. Like that conversation's not going to happen, or it didn't happen.
It didn't happen with me. I had that first TV match where I lost, and then it was just kind of like, at that point because basically what it was at that point, I was getting texts every week like, hey, we need you this week, we need you this week, and then they just kind of stopped. And I would reach out occasionally, just being like, hey, like if you need someone, I'm available, that sort of thing. And you never got any. I got responses, but it was just like, oh, we don't have anything for you this week. And then, yeah, it just kind of out of nowhere, like, hey, we got a spot for you. And then they didn't tell me what the plan was until I got there that day. And it was kind of like, hey, like, here's the spot. And, I didn't know that I was, being primed to win the championship. It was just kind of like, here's the spot. We're going to have you do this. The next week, we're going to have a non-title match. And then the next week, we'll make it for the title. And I didn't know what the plan was until I got there that day.
When you win the title, are you more shocked than like the audience kind of thing? Because it's like, it almost seems like, no way am I winning the title. You know what I mean? Like just the trajectory of it.
It was funny because when they told me, I was like, oh, okay. I wasn't expecting it. I do think the fans were probably even a little bit more shocked than I was, just because they hadn't seen me in so long, and I'm sure that there was even newer fans that had never seen me at all. So like, who's this guy that shows up and then suddenly 2 weeks later he's the champion? But I do think that because I'm a pretty big guy, and I have the character, which was really over as a heel. I think that it was easier for them to buy once they kind of saw me in person. But yeah, I do think there was definitely some shock there from both myself and fans.
Do they explain to you like the direction after you win the title of like what's going on? Do they finally get with you as far as like you know cooperation of
Yeah,
like, hey, this is what we're gonna do with this, we love this character, we love you. Here's where we're going. Go when we go forward.
it's funny. My entire career, I have never been the kind of guy to be like, "Hey, what's the plan?"
Hmm.
I've always just kind of been a guy that's like, I show up every week and they say, "Hey, here's what we're doing tonight," and I'm just like, "Okay, let's do it." So, if I'm losing a title or winning a title or winning or losing a match, like I never know, because it's one of those things where I kind of feel like I'm good enough to where no matter what they give me, I can make it work. So I have confidence in my abilities. So whatever the plan is, I'll make it work.
What do you think about the pantheon of the OVW championship and you being a part of it? Because obviously there's some pretty huge names that came through there and you could put your name right next to them.
Yeah, I remember when I first won the championship, a buddy of mine texted me and was like he was he was just congratulating me, and then he said something that was very, very crazy to me. He's like, at one point in time, that was probably the third biggest championship in the world. And I'm like, I didn't even think about it that way. And I'm like, holy crap, like he's right. And
Yep.
at OVW they have like a bunch of pictures of the alumni, and I'm sitting here like, man, I don't belong. I don't belong in that group. But I feel like over time I've earned my way into that group.
What do you think about Al Snow? Obviously, a wrestling legend. We know him very well as far as the Netflix wrestlers. We got to kind of learn more about him. But what do you think about Al?
Al is one of those guys that, like, he's forgotten more about wrestling than I'll ever know. He's one of those kind of guys, and he almost knows so much about wrestling that you kind of hate him for it. It's just like, how do you understand this on such a higher level? And I like to joke because anyone who's met Al Snow would probably say the same thing. I've known Al for a little over 2 years now, and I still don't know if he likes me or not. I mean, I'm joking. Like, I know Al likes me, but he's just not that. He's not the kind of guy he's very like drill sergeant in a way. Like,
Hmm.
he's not gonna like just throw compliments out willy nilly. At least not like he'll say it to you privately. He's complimented me privately, but Al's very much just like he's just one of those old school guys, man. And it's one of those things where kind of just listen to him, because like there's been times where after a match he kind of explains something to me, and then I'll ask a question, and then I get a 20-minute psychology lesson. I'm like, oh, it's like stuff that I wouldn't even have thought to think about it that way. And then now I'm using that when I teach younger guys. I like remember those lessons and teach them, basically, handing it down to the next generation.
With him, is he the one that will say like, "Hey, you're winning the title," or is everything through the agent? Obviously, he's in charge, but is everything through the agent, or is he the one kind of telling you where you're headed?
It's kind of a mix of both. I mean, like you said, Al kind of has, control over everything at the end of the day. He is obviously he's more hands-on with the bigger matches. So when it's the heavyweight championship or the national title or something like that, he's a lot more like, hey, here's what we're doing, here's what I want, that sort of thing. So he's more hands-on with the bigger matches, but at the end of the day, everything does go through him. So there's no match I've ever had that he hasn't had some sort of say in.
Do you feel like you and him kind of click in a certain way? Like, if you think about it, right? Veterans of the business, you create a certain gimmick, the veteran, the last real wrestler, and notice like, okay, this character catches on, and I start to get a push. Al Snow was around forever, great
Mhm.
wrestler. Everyone used to say how great he was, but really didn't get over until he started with the head and being nuts. And you don't even like that's when he really sent the trajectory. Do you guys feel like a kinship in that certain way?
I don't know. I don't know if Al looks at me this as a veteran the same way that he is. I mean, he knows that I've been around a long time. I know that he respects me as a wrestler, and obviously if he wouldn't put championships on me and continue to use me if he didn't. But no, I think his generation and my generation are two very, very different types of generations in wrestling. So I don't know if we have a kinship in that way, but it's more just like mutual respect. And uh, he's Al's kind of a stoic guy, but he has a great sense of humor. I mean, obviously, I think a lot of people know he does stand-up comedy, but he's very monotone and very almost kind of intense at times. But no, I think we get along great. But I think that we definitely have different different generations. So there's like sort of like a generation clash in a way.
When you look at the Veteran, right? That gimmick, what's like the origin of it though? Like what's the thought process behind it? Because it's such a great idea. I'm surprised like more people like haven't done it. You know what I mean? Like it's like a great old school perfect heel gimmick.
Yeah, and it happened by complete accident. So in 2019 was when I decided to come back to wrestling full time and try to give it another shot and really give it my all this time. And I was actually wrestling as Wild Thing Jack Vaughn. And then this was probably November or so of 2019. I went to a show in Indianapolis. I wasn't even booked on it. I just went because a bunch of my friends were on it that I hadn't seen in a long time. And I was talking to a friend of mine after the show, and I don't even remember how we got on the subject, but we were kind of just talking about, man, there needs to be like someone in wrestling who's just that old school grizzled veteran who sort of breaks the fourth wall and talks about how these young guys are killing his business and stuff like that. And that's kind of like where we left it. And then I'm driving home, and I got a lot of time to think. It's about a 2-hour drive. And the whole time on the way home, I'm just thinking about this character, just like idea after idea. And then I was just like, man, yeah, like someone needs to do this. And then I was like, I think I need to do this. And then I said the name out loud. I said the Veteran Jack Vaughn, and then it just clicked. And then I just had all these ideas that I filmed a promo in character. I did some other videos for like YouTube and stuff. And then COVID hit. So I didn't get to actually do anything with the gimmick for about 6-7 months. But yeah, that's how it started, was just talking with a friend and thinking like, man, like this character, like it is very, Mick Foley, I believe, is who said that like the best characters are the ones that are your real personality just turned up to 10. And that is very true for the Veteran. I'm not as crude as maybe the Veteran is at times, but it is very similar to how I really feel about wrestling. I do think wrestling and independent wrestling has kind of gotten out of hand in some regards. I mean, we've already kind of talked about it a little bit.
Yep.
And it just fit. And everything, when I first started working as the Veteran, everything that I did was to try to invoke that old school mentality and work style.
Such a great idea. I love that the gimmick. I mean, it's just such a funny gimmick, but it's simple, but it's one of those things where it doesn't necessarily need to hit you over the head, but you get what it is. I mean, like this guy's a grizzled veteran.
Mm-hmm.
He hates these young guys coming up. It's just to me it clicks. It works.
Yeah, and one of the things that people complimented me on when I first started doing it was like, it's an actual gimmick. It's not just some guy who's, he calls himself the something, whatever, and he just goes out there and wrestles. It was an actual gimmick, and I was, working it the way that it should have. I wasn't doing anything flashy. I was doing, atomic drops and airplane spins and stuff like that, which is stuff that I still do. But like everything was just meant to be old school and just that like really in your face, kind of like Stan Hansen, almost JBL kind of stuff. And yeah, that's how I wanted it to work. And that's, it's changed a little bit because of how it was designed to be a complete heel. I didn't want anyone to like me. I didn't want fans. I didn't want people to cheer for me. I wanted to actually be an old school heel that people hated.
Yep.
And then the social media stuff took off, and now I'm a babyface everywhere I go.
Yeah, now they love it. Now they're getting into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love though, like the thought process behind it. It's like so many people are going this way. Like I'm gonna go this way, which it's like an old school way, but nobody's going old school anymore. It seems like everybody's trying to go a different direction.
It was almost a situation where what's old is new again, because everyone is, and even though a lot of these guys are great in-ring performers, a lot of them are doing a lot of the same stuff. And I feel like when you do that, it's hard to stand out. So if I'm gonna be this old school wrestler, I'm gonna do stuff that people haven't seen in 20 years, and I'm gonna stand out that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. Whenever I see a guy that's doing something different, it could even be something you've seen before, but something different than the pack, I feel like they stick out more. Even if they're doing less, I feel like they stick out more because everybody else is doing the same stuff.
Exactly. Yep.
So back to OVW here. Obviously, you're the three-time world champion. How come on the wrestlers documentary on Netflix? How come you weren't featured more? Because I mean, you're there while they're filming, right? I mean, how come you're not a bigger part of the documentary?
So I really started with the company. Like when I first won that championship after being gone for 6 months, they were already about halfway through filming.
Oh wow, okay, I didn't realize that. Okay,
They had started before I had come back. So like it was weird because like when I was doing the dark matches, they were talking about it. And I think they had already filmed like sort of like a teaser reel, like a sizzle reel to try to pitch to companies. And then it was while I was gone that they started filming. So when I first came back, they were probably only filming for another month or so. And yeah, that's the main reason. Because I have had a lot of people ask me like, I expected to see you on the documentary and you weren't. Like, what's the deal? And a lot of people like commenting on OVW like, why wasn't Jack Vaughn a bigger part of this? And I was really hoping that there'd be a season 2. I guess the verdict is still out on that, but that's the main reason. I just wasn't around, and by that time they kind of already decided who they were going to follow for the show.
the magic of the film. I'm thinking it's more recent, but obviously they were filming it and then they have to edit it. So I was thinking my timing was off. So I was like, man, he should have been in it more. What the hell's going on? But obviously that makes perfect sense. You got there a little late. What did you think about it?
I thought the show was great. I mean, the director's the same guy that did Last Chance U and Cheer. I never watched Cheer, but I loved Last Chance U. So yeah, like I kind of already knew what his style was, and I thought that I thought they did a great job just portraying what it's like for an independent wrestler and an independent wrestling company.
Obviously, that gets more eyeballs on OVW, gets more notice. The Davis Arena was being sold out like crazy. I forget the amount of weeks in a row it was. Was
Yeah.
that something that was a little unexpected, or were you guys maybe expecting that?
I think we were expecting the show to be good because of the guy's pedigree, and I think we did expect the the arena, like the fans to kind of come in droves, and they did. I don't think we expected them to come in for as long as they did because, like you said, it was sold out for probably 3 months or something like that consecutively.
Yep.
And we're still seeing an increase in fans, especially compared to what it was before the documentary. But yeah, I mean, I think we all kind of expected a bump, but it was maybe lasted a little bit longer than we maybe expected, and we're still seeing the effects of it.
And national tour now. So it's like not just, the area of Ohio Valley. I mean, you guys you're going elsewhere. You're traveling to different
Mhm.
states. What do you think about the national tour?
It's been a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I like to be at every one that I can. But with me, like my independent dates are, thankfully, my calendar's pretty full. So a lot of times I get booked months in advance, and then they'll announce a show, and I'm like, sorry guys, I can't be there. And they've been very cool about that. It's not a case where it's like, well, you have to be here at every show. They're very accommodating for that. But no, it's been great being able to go to, we went to Chicago. We're actually going to be in my hometown next week, Cincinnati. We got the big Pikeville show coming up on August 31st, and I can't remember what all cities we have planned. I know there's a Pennsylvania date. They're going to Milwaukee in a couple weeks. So yeah, it's really cool to be able to travel and let people see what OVW is all about.
Were you surprised at all that the success of the show would lead to a tour like that, or was that something that it was like a hopeful thing behind the scenes?
I believe they had talked about wanting to kind of take the show on the road, assuming that the show did well, which it did. And yeah, so that wasn't so much a surprise. I wasn't expecting to as many dates. I thought it was going to be like, maybe one show a week or maybe one show every couple of weeks, kind of going out somewhere. But yeah, I mean, it's been great.
Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, of course, the Kentucky Fair, Indiana, and like you said, Pikesville too. So yeah, it's a lot of good wrestling takedowns, if you will. The good
Yeah.
stuff. I love that. So with that, right? That means you guys have investors on board. Were you expecting that at all? Was that something that was kind of like out of left field that, hey, now we have new investors because we're gaining in popularity. We're growing, literally growing because of Netflix and because of this series. Were you surprised about the investors, or is that something that it was bound to happen?
I'm not a businessman, so like I wasn't really. We already had like Matt and some
Yep.
other guys on board, and I wasn't really sure what the plan was. I wasn't sure if we were going to try to maybe turn this into like a national, like maybe try to get like a TV deal, or I think there was some early talks about maybe actually having us show our weekly shows on Netflix. I think that was in discussion. But no, like I'm not a business guy, so I wasn't really. I can't really say if I expected it or not. But I'm not surprised. Whenever something blows up in popularity, there's a lot of people wanting to try to get a piece of the pie, and
Yep.
understandably. So it was, like I said, it wasn't something I expected, but not entirely surprising.
One thing it's almost like bittersweet about the series, and I don't know if guys, obviously yourself or guys backstage think the same thing, but as that series had so much success, critical acclaim too. I mean, I loved it. Everybody loved it. It was so well done. But then all of a sudden, Netflix is getting on the radar for wrestling. So of course, the big boys in Connecticut, WWE, they notice it and then they make a deal with Netflix. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like
Yeah.
a little bittersweet because this is so good, this is so great. But then, like, did they just take our deal? Because we kind of had a good deal going here. You know what I mean? It's almost like they saw something that was successful that you guys did for Netflix.
Yeah, and obviously I can't really speculate on anything, but my
Right.
personal fear is
Yep.
that I think that's probably, if there is no second season of the show, that's probably why. Because I would imagine if WWE is going to have a deal with Netflix, one of the parts of the deal is no other wrestling on the service. So
Yep.
that is a concern of mine. But I mean they're the juggernaut; they can kind of do what they want. But it is kind of upsetting to see. I wish there would be some sort of deal that could be made to have us both on there, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's one of the things. Sometimes it could be so successful that the big monsters notice it and like, oh, we want this success too because they knocked it out of the park. We can knock it out of the park, kind of thing. So it's always like a bittersweet situation, I think.
Yeah, it's a bit of a bummer, but we'll see. I mean, I don't know all the details of every deal that's in place with the companies, but if it doesn't happen, it's a bummer. But I hope it does.
But it does seem like with you guys growing so much, there's going to be other possibilities and other things opening up too, right? I mean, it just seems like you guys are definitely on the radar big time nowadays.
I hope so. I mean, I know that as far as I understand, again, I hope this doesn't get me in trouble with any of the OVW people, but this is all just me speculating. I
Yeah,
haven't been told anything.
right.
The guy that did Wrestlers, if I remember right, he has an exclusive deal with Netflix. And if WWE says, hey, no other wrestling, that means if there's going to be a season 2, I would imagine it's got to be with a different director and on a different service. But at the same time, when you see how successful the show is, I can't imagine it would be too hard to find someone that would be willing to try a second season and
Yep.
maybe put it on like Apple or Hulu or whatever the case may be. So I definitely think that there is room for someone else to kind of come in and take the reins and try to continue the story. Because I think just showing the success from the first show is a really good basis for a second season.
And so well done, and I love how you get behind the scenes of what wrestling is really like. You know what I mean? Like they actually told the story of real wrestling, not like the reality shows of the world do, where it's very fake and it's very scripted. This seemed like very genuine.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's almost like a grassroots kind of thing. It's like none of us are making a living doing it. It's all us just kind of putting our heart and soul into it. And I think that's there's something to be said for that kind of wrestling.
Now, give me your true thoughts on internet wrestling fans. So you got to give me your real thoughts.
Most of them are very cool. Um, I mean, they all know, and I don't think I'm surprising anyone here. They all know that wrestling is not a legitimate competition, and that's been known for a long time. and sometimes they get a little hot at some of the things that I say or put into a video. And it does surprise me because it's like, guys, this isn't real. But apparently it's real when I say it. I don't know. Like, for the most part, like, the thing is, I get some hate, but for every one negative comment I get, I have 20 other people that love what I'm doing. So, it sucks that it happens at all. Obviously no one likes to see a bunch of negative stuff being said about themselves, but at the same time, I have such a bigger support system than I have haters. So most independent internet wrestling fans are really cool and they get it. And then there's a few, bad eggs in the bunch that kind of ruin it for everyone. And, it's like that with anything entertainment wise. There's always going to be like the gatekeepers that try to prevent people from, well, if you don't have my same level of knowledge, then you're not as big of a fan as mine or as me. And that sucks to see, but it's, I guess to be expected in any form of entertainment these days.
When you look at some of the fans too, I crack up. Obviously, I am a fan. I am one of them in a certain aspect, but I won't be like disrespectful to the wrestlers. But sometimes you look at their picture, their avatar, or, if they're on Twitter or whatever, and you're like, that's a cartoon, or you know what I mean? Like, that's not a real person. Like who is this? Like, they're like not hiding, but they're not really showing who they really are. They're like almost like a parody of themselves. It's a weird bunch.
The thing with social media that there's that famous Mike Tyson saying that I don't remember verbatim, but basically like paraphrasing, the problem with social media is that it gives people anonymity and no fear of getting punched in the mouth.
Yes.
And that's really what it is. There's no consequences for the things that you say on social media. And I mean, that's case in point why it's some of the wrestling fandom is so toxic, is because, they can tell me that I suck or whatever, and I can't do anything about it. I just kind of take it. But at the same time, it's coming from people that can't do what I do. It's coming from people that have never stepped in the ring before or had a match, so I don't really take their opinions too seriously.
Yeah, it's not like Al Snow's out there ripping you and saying, "Oh, I don't like this video." You know what I mean? It's some guy with an avatar of like Dragon Ball Z or something. You know what I mean? It's not a real somebody should be taking any criticism from.
For the most part, like all the like quote unquote names that I've kind of become acquaintances with, they all love what I'm doing. So, I'm getting complimented from people that have actually been there and done it. And it's like I said, it's a bunch of people that have never stepped foot in a wrestling ring that don't like what I'm doing. But that's, like I said, it's to be expected. I mean, it's, I think just fans in general, if you're a fan of anything, we invest ourselves so much in our fandoms that anything that is conceived or perceived to be like even slightly critical, it's almost taken like a personal attack. Like if I'm from Cincinnati, so I'm a big Bengals fan, but I've never played a game for the Bengals, but if anyone talks bad about the Bengals, it upsets me because that's my team.
Yeah.
So if I say something that people infer to be critical of a wrestler that they like, or a company or a style, they take it as a personal insult. And rather than just kind of being like, oh, it's a joke, or it's, maybe it is meant to be criticism, but maybe it's criticism that we can talk about. And that's the biggest problem, is that no one wants to have a discussion. People just want to throw insults and hate at each other.
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunate nowadays. It seems like that's the way it goes. The Bengals, are they going to be good this year or what? I mean, I was pretty disappointed in them last year.
Well, with what happened to Joey B,
Yep.
Kind of expected the season to be a bit of a letdown, but I think as long as they can stay healthy, I think they have a good chance this year. Obviously, the Super Bowl year was a heartbreaker for me, but I think they have a solid chance to get back there this year.
Man, if Burrow doesn't get hurt, they're going to be dangerous. He's one of the best, if not the best. He's one of the best.
Absolutely.
As we hit the wind down here and we head towards the finish, where is the most favorite place that you've wrestled? Just, it could be, I know you wrestled in some different countries, like, where's the favorite place you've ever wrestled?
Favorite place I've ever wrestled? Man. So, I would say my favorite country that I've ever been to is Finland, but that wasn't so much for the wrestling. That was just because the country is so beautiful and like just a cool place to be. Honestly, like there was a place that I wrestled last year in the UK in London. It was at a venue called the Bedford, and it's like this big, like grand hotel. And the venue was really cool. It was like an old concert venue where like a bunch of classic UK bands had played, like the Clash and stuff like that. And it was like almost like a concert building, but it had like a balcony, and it was like jam packed. I think it might have been sold out, but it was just like a really tight space, sold out. Everyone's having a good time. That was a really fun show. And then other than that, like, I mean, there's a bunch of places here in the States that I love going, that it's kind of hard to name just one, but that one at the Bedford was one that like really stood out to me. It's just like a really cool show and a really cool venue to be a part of.
The last real pro wrestler, right? I mean, he's the veteran. Is there going to be any more additions like to the videos? I know we were saying before you got one coming out, but any ones that you are thinking about that you haven't done yet that you're like, man, I want to touch on this subject? I mean, what's next as far as some of those cool videos and those funny videos?
At this point, I kind of have a bunch of different series of videos established. So, a lot of it is adding to those. It's been 2 years since I started doing the videos, and I still feel like I have so many ideas. I have in the notes in my phone, me and my wife have a shared document where we have probably another 100 ideas, but sometimes it's just a matter of like logistically, like how do we make this video? Because it might require us to go somewhere or to have a certain amount of people, and sometimes schedules just don't line up. But we actually have had an idea to do something that's a little bit more, probably meant more for YouTube. They're almost like a sitcom type thing, almost like more like 5 to 10 minute videos. But we're still kind of working that out. But that's kind of something that I want to kind of delve into. And then I also mentioned recently on Facebook that I kind of want to delve into doing more informative videos that are more so meant specifically for people in wrestling. It's not meant for like fans to come in and comment. I don't almost have to make it like a Patreon or like a private group or something. But, I do feel like I'm closer to the end of my career than the start. And I do feel like I have a lot of knowledge to give. So I think it's probably about that time where I start helping the younger generation, because one of the criticisms that I've gotten is that, well, if you know so much, why don't you help people rather than criticize them? And even though my stuff is meant to be satirical and tongue-in-cheek, and the wrestlers get it, I do think that's a valid point, and I do enjoy teaching wrestling, so that might be another direction I decide to go.
Are you liking maybe the idea of being like an agent producer in the future?
Probably. I think, I do think that I have a good mind for the creative side of wrestling. I know that me personally, like if I were, I feel like I'm personally better at watching a match and then critiquing it rather than like helping guys put together their match, because I feel like the wrestlers themselves know their stuff better than anybody else. So I feel like I'm much more like, hey, I'll watch your match and then here's my feedback. So I do think that there's a spot for me when I decide to stop wrestling, or maybe even being like a sort of a player coach kind of role. I do think there's a place for that, for place in wrestling for me to do that. And I would love to open my own school. It's just right now with my schedule, it would be really hard to like schedule specific days for training. But that is another avenue I'd like to explore.
Finally, what is next for you? What do you got coming up down the road, wrestling wise?
I'm going back to Europe in November. I'm going to be spending a few days in Bulgaria doing a 3-day seminar.
Wow.
And then
Cool.
From Bulgaria, we're going to go to Poland, where I'm going to be doing a seminar and a show. And then outside of that, it's just, I hope that within the next 12 months, there's maybe a contract in there from somebody. I don't think at this, I just turned 39. I don't think that the WWE is necessarily my future. I hope I'm wrong, but personally, I think, at this point, I'm content with sort of the stamp I've left on wrestling. If it were to end today, I'd be completely happy with how things have turned out. But there's that part of me that just, regardless of what company it's with, I just want to have a contract and have that one run, at least one run with a national company.
I love that. I would love to see it. Love to see the veteran out there. Where can everybody find you, follow you, social media, and otherwise, where could they see some of these awesome, funny videos that you've created?
Yeah, so pretty much all social media platforms, I am at Vet Jack Vaughn. Vaughn is Vaughn, just like it says on the screen there. Facebook is just Jack Vaughn, and then I also have a YouTube channel, which is mostly for matches, but you can just find that at the Veteran Jack Vaughn.
And are you really the last real pro wrestler? Are you really the last one?
I mean, as far as I know, no one's proven me wrong yet.
Yes, true. Jack, thank you so much for all time. The veteran, I implore everyone to seek him out and follow him and watch some of those videos. Very, very good stuff. Very entertaining stuff. Nothing too crazy as far as ripping anybody, but it's just really good and really funny stuff. Thank you so much for all the time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.